Good morning. This is Rich Sierra, president of the Florida Small Business Legal Center, where this is episode number 9 of Business SOS podcast. Just before we introduce our special guest today, I'll tell you about Business SOS. It's a book that for business owners, and the objective is to give you some tips on how to avoid the 8 common legal mistakes that business owners make. And we'll talk about lease agreements, talks about partnerships. It is a must-buy guide for business owners. And also, I also want you to participate in the show. So if you have a legal question you want to ask me at some point and you're interested in me covering that question for you, just send me an email at rich@richsierra.com. If I select your question, I talk about your issue. I'm not going to mention your name. I'll send a free copy of my book, autographed for you. So again, the email is rich@richsierra.com. So today we have a special guest, my friend and colleague, Deirdre Nero, from Nero Immigration Law. And let me introduce you to Deirdre. Deirdre started her own immigration and nationality law firm in Nero Immigration Law in February 2009. After having practiced in 2 large firms for several years, with 20 years of experience under her belt, Deirdre has helped hundreds of clients from all over the globe navigate the complicated world of immigration law. Originally from New Jersey, Deirdre has lived in Florida for over 20 years. She earned a bachelor's degree, magna cum laude, from FSU, and graduated with honors from the University of Miami School of Law. Deirdre has been a member of the Florida Bar since 2003. Deirdre's practice focuses on all types of business immigration, including employment-based immigrant and non-immigrant visas. She frequently works with companies to ensure they are compliant with immigration laws relating to I-9, E-Verify, and immigration-related discrimination. Deirdre works closely with companies to coordinate and execute all aspects of their immigration strategy and represent them before the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Department of Labor, the U.S. Department of State. She represents clients in all 50 states and from countries across the globe. She holds an AV Preeminent rating since 2014, showing she is well respected by her peers. She's honored to be named Florida Trend magazine as one of 2019 and 2021's Legal Elite, representing the top 1% of Florida attorneys. Welcome to the show, Deirdre.
Thank you.
Very excited you're
Sorry,
here.
the bio was so long.
I'm very excited you're here with us today.
Me too. I'm really happy to be here.
How do you get started with immigration law? What drew you to the field?
So I always wanted to do something that dealt with international clientele. I always was drawn to that. When I was in university and after, and also during law school, I studied abroad in Spain, and it really opened my eyes up to kind of other cultures and living, with people of other nationalities and just experiencing the world. I traveled a lot. So I always thought, let me try to find an area of law where I can work with international clientele. So in law school, I tried all kinds of international law related classes, and I was really kind of like, I don't want to love any of this. It's okay, but And then I took my immigration law class, and finally I was actually interested in one of my law school classes. I actually wanted to study and raise my hand and read the assignments, unlike my other classes where it was kind of torturous. So I had an idea that I liked that. And then I was lucky enough to start clerking in a law firm during school and working in their immigration department. So I got exposure to actually, doing actual cases. And from there, the rest is history. I kind of found what I was passionate about, and I went for it right away. So I've been only practicing immigration law for my entire career.
It is awesome when you practice something that you love. Like I've been doing business law for 18 years, working with small businesses, and that is my passion.
It's true. I can't imagine doing any other area of law. And it's funny because during the pandemic, when some of the immigration bans and stuff were going in, I was thinking, oh my God, am I going to have to find another area of law to practice? Is this going to be the death of immigration law? And I got really nervous about that because I was like, first of all, I don't know how to do anything else after 20 years. But second of all, this is what I love, Luckily, it was the opposite, and we got more busy instead of less busy, so it worked out. but I was worried there for a second.
No, that is awesome. What is Nero Immigration Law, and what type of clients do you serve?
So our firm is a boutique firm. We're located in Coral Gables, which is in the Miami-Dade County in South Florida. We help people from all nationalities and all states. That's a cool thing about immigration laws. Since it's federal law, we can have clientele from basically anywhere. And what we focus on at our firm is mostly what we call business immigration, or you might hear it referred to as employment-based immigration. So that's really focusing on investors, entrepreneurs, professional workers, corporate immigration. We have people that are, from every kind of industry and business you could imagine, helping individuals that want to come here to work at U.S. companies or maybe start their own company, but also companies that want to hire foreign nationals and need, the proper visa or work authorization for those people. And then we also help individuals once they're here to stay here legally and maybe get a more longer term benefit instead of a temporary benefit. So we can take people from temporary visas to permanent residence or green cards all the way to citizenship. And those are my favorite kinds of cases where I get to treat the whole life cycle of someone's immigration journey. They start maybe as a tourist, and then they come as a foreign student, and then they start working, and they get a work visa, and then they get their green card, and then their citizenship, and then maybe they want to sponsor family members once they're citizens. So I have clients that I've had since day one of my firm still, 20 years later. So it's pretty cool.
How long will that process take? Come from a tourist and they go to citizenship. I know every example is different, but how long does it take, for example?
It can take a long time. Yeah. Something unfortunate about our immigration system is that most of the processes that you're going to have to go through are pretty slow. Now, there's a wide range of what I mean by slow, right? I mean, slow could be a couple of months, which in my opinion, that's fast because I know what real slow is. Real slow is years. It could be years. I mean, and then there are types of cases that when you say years, you're really talking about decades, maybe, like a U.S. citizen sponsoring a sibling for residence, like a foreign national sibling of a U.S. citizen. Those cases can take 10, 15 plus years.
You have a lot of patience for that.
Yes, and you need to have a good strategy because a lot of times you don't want to wait that long to actually be able to be in the United States living, right? So then we can try to find other solutions that are more temporary but shorter term solutions while you wait for those big long-term results at the end. So it's part of what we do is try to come up with the strategy to serve the person's ultimate goals.
So say, I have some clients from South America. They come here, they want to visit, and they want to become they want to get an investor visa. What would be the process of acquiring one?
So we do a lot of investor visas at our firm. I think it's one of our sweet spots and one of the things that we deal with a lot. So the first question is, are they from a country that has an investor visa treaty with the U.S.? Because investor visas in particular, when we're talking about temporary investor visas, so not green cards, but visas that are for a couple of years, renewable like that. And the barrier to entry is a lot lower than, for example, an investor green card. So that's typically your first kind of option. What country are they from? If they're from a country that doesn't have a treaty with the U.S., then they're not going to be able to even take advantage of that option. So that's usually our first kind of discussion. Then after that, we have to look at, what do they want to do in the United States? Do they, what kind of investment are they looking to make? A lot of people think, I can buy a really expensive house, and that's an investment, so I can get an investor visa. And unfortunately, our immigration system doesn't consider that to be an investment for purposes of one of these visas, right? Even if you buy a multi-million-dollar mansion, that's not going to be an investment. It has to be an active business, right? Going concern. So we look at what they want to do. How much investment are they making into this business? Is it a business that already exists? Are they starting something from scratch? Are they going to buy a franchise? what are they doing, and what is the level of investment that's going to be required for that? And then also, are they going to create employment? The Immigration Service and the Department of State that adjudicates these cases, they really want to see that when investors are starting businesses here, that they're going to create jobs for U.S. workers. And U.S. workers can be U.S. citizens, can be people with green cards, can be people with unrestricted working authorization in the United States, but they want to see that. So it's important that we get a really good business plan that has all of those elements dug deep. And it's funny, you have to do a lot before you can apply. Like, you can't just have an idea and put some money in a bank account. Someone once said I at a conference I attended, when you're doing an investor visa, you have to be in the pool with the water up to your neck. The water doesn't have to be over your head, but it's got to be already up to your neck by the time you apply, because they want to see that you've already taken steps. So, we work with clients a lot of times when it's just an idea, like they have done nothing yet. And even though that's kind of like the slow burn client, like that's going to take a while for that to come to fruition. Those are good clients for us because we can help them from day one do everything the right way and make sure that they're not making mistakes in the way that they set up their business, or, just any kind of mistake that then we're either going to have to fix and change, and they're going to then waste money and time redoing things that they already did, or it might be a problem that's like fatal to their case and it prevents them from moving forward. Typically not, but sometimes that could happen. So it's good to get people right from the beginning and help them from day one. But that process can be complicated. It also depends like what country you're from. We have some issues right now with, for example, Colombia. There's a lot of Colombian nationals that want to get investor visas to come to the United States. And the U.S. Embassy in Colombia has suspended investor visa processing for a couple of years now. When the pandemic hit, they kind of suspended the processing, and then they didn't restart it. And just recently, they said, okay, we're going to start processing the cases that we had before the pandemic, but no new cases yet. So we're just like every day checking. Are they ready for new cases yet? Because we've got a bunch of people that we would like to do it. So we try to come up with other solutions for those people in the meantime, but it complicates things and is going to make things more difficult for the applicant.
Is there a minimum investment that an investor has to bring to the United States to apply for, say, the investor visa? Is there guidelines or ranges?
I probably hear that question 10 times a day. So I think I should do probably a video about that.
We're doing one now,
that's
what we're doing now.
The high point question, yeah. So all you out there in podcast land, yeah, you heard it here. There isn't. For a non-immigrant investor visa, there is no level of investment that's required in the law, and likewise, there's no level of employment creation required. You have to show both, but they don't tell you how much. Now, people will say, well, I heard that it has to be at least $100,000, this and that. And I'm like, okay, that's actually not true. That's not written anywhere. You'll search and search and search. You're not going to find that. However, there's always a but in legal land. We see in practice, we've done just hundreds and hundreds of these cases over the last 20 years. Yeah, I mean, if you don't hit the 6-figure mark, you're going to have more of an uphill battle getting that case approved. The adjudicators don't take the cases that seriously when you're not investing at least 6 figures. But you can get cases approved that aren't 6 figures. I mean, you just have to have a really good case and make a really persuasive argument, and it's still approvable, even if it's under 6 figures. So it all depends on how good of a case you have aside from that, right? Like the other elements and how strong they are. They also look at, for example, the proportionality of like the investment that you're making in comparison to the total amount that's needed to launch whatever this business is, right? So if you say, oh, I'm going to start this big business, it's $1 million to start, and I'm going to invest $100,000. That is, of the total pie, a very small slice, right? But if you're investing the same 100,000, but the total needed is only 150, then you're investing a much larger slice of the total pie that's needed. So actually the second scenario would be a better case than the first scenario. So we look at that stuff as well.
Before I ask about employment-based immigration, are they, popular businesses or preferred businesses that investors should look at when applying for an investor visa? I've heard about franchises. I've had cases that.
So franchises are great, especially if people are like, they don't really know what they want to do exactly. They don't already have an idea, or maybe they have just like a general industry that they want to be in, but they don't have like that one idea, or they don't have a company already in their country that they're going to now like open the U.S. operations of, because that's a very common scenario, right? Like the investors already are doing a certain type of business in their home country, and then they want to expand operations to the U.S., and an investor visa is one way that you can do that. So those people already, like, they got their plan, you know what I mean? And as long as it's a legal business and you're not doing something that's not lawful in the U.S., then it's fine, it's a good business. If it's going to take money and create some employment, then you should be good to go. Franchises, though, are really good for people who are kind of not sure exactly what they want to do. And also buying an existing business is also a good option for a lot of people that want to do an investor visa. But there's no particular industry that is, more favorably looked upon than others. It just has to be something that's going to hit the required elements and that's legal.
Okay, awesome. I want to talk a little bit about employment-based immigration. How do employers utilize your services to bring employees from other countries into the United States?
So that's a large part of our practice. And it's a great, I love what I do. I think we get to work with some really interesting people with really awesome talents and skills and professions and some great companies. But it can be hard, right? There's different types of visas for different types of workers, right? So first of all, we look at like, what country are the people from? Because some countries have special visas just for nationals of that country. For example, the Treaty NAFTA visa, TN visa, which is not even called NAFTA anymore, but they didn't change the name of the visa. I think it's called the USMCA now. But for Mexican and Canadian professional workers that work in an area that's on a list that is actually from the treaty, a list of professions, those visas are relatively simple to get in comparison to other types of work visas. So like if we see that they're Mexican or Canadian in nationality, we'll look at that type of visa first. So like first inquiry is always like what country they're from. Australians, people from Chile, Singapore, some of them also have special visas for work. So, and those are mostly workers on a professional level, like so people that have a profession that requires a degree in a particular field or a certain level of experience and licensure and things like that. But then you can be talking about workers that aren't of that level, right? Maybe more blue collar, maybe people that are skilled but not professional. So then there's other types of visas for those types of workers. And then on the other end of that, you have like the superstar visas, right? We call them, a lot of times they're referred to as talent visas. They're O1, extraordinary ability visas. Those are considered to be work visas because you have to be sponsored by a U.S. company or an agent in some circumstances. And that's kind of like the other end of the spectrum where it's like the cream of the crop, the top level people in their field can go after those visas. So we really analyze like the person's skills, education, background, any special talents and recognitions that they have. And then also the company and like, what are they wanting to hire them to do? And are they going to be able to pay a required wage? Some of these visas have like a wage level that the employer has to be able to meet. The unfortunate thing is that the visa that is most commonly available to, or like the best fit for most professionals, so like your standard IT professional, your standard, person with a business degree, marketing professionals, people that are in tech and engineers, like those people are mostly going to fall under what's called an H-1B visa. Those visas are great if you can get it. It's like if you're one of the lucky ones that gets it, it's a great visa, but there's a quota on those visas. And so, like, if you don't get into the group of people that are lucky enough to be selected in that year's quota amount, then you have to wait till the next year. So those are kind of like, they run a lottery to see, who can even apply for the visa. So first you have to be selected in the lottery, and then you get to present your case and either get it approved or denied on the merits. But if you don't get selected in the lottery, you don't even get to play the game at all. Like, you're game over.
Remember NAFTA in the 90s, I was a hospital recruiter before I was an attorney, and then we recruited nurses from Canada in the 90s, and that was due to NAFTA. That's an example of how they were able to get through the visa program, bring a lot of professionals in.
Yeah, and there's some, like, special considerations sometimes for certain industries, but especially if there's, like, high shortage levels and stuff, but typically not, but sometimes. So it's a lot more complicated than people think, which I guess is good for me, because that's why I have a job, right? If this was like super easy stuff, I would be out of luck. I wouldn't have a profession. But yeah, it can be kind of complicated.
I want to switch gears for a second, talk about SB 1718 that just passed recently in Florida. Can you tell us more about that and how it affects employers?
So this is new for us. I mean, when I say we, I mean immigration lawyers. We're used to just dealing with federal level stuff, right? Because immigration is federal law. So for us to be talking about state laws, it's kind of like a new game for those of us who have been around for a while. So we're kind of like, minds exploding across the state of the immigration attorneys in Florida. SB 1718 recently passed. It is an immigration bill that has lots of restrictions in different areas of immigration. But the one that we're fielding the most questions about in my office, due to the type of immigration that we practice, is the portion mandating mandatory E-Verify for companies with at least 25 employees. So E-Verify is right now a voluntary program on a federal level in most states. There are a couple of states where it's already mandatory, but Florida wasn't one of them unless you were a federal contractor and had like federal contracts. Then they made it mandatory, I think, a couple years ago. But right now they're expanding it out to basically any and all companies that have at least 25 employees on payroll. And what it is a electronic system of verifying your employees' identity, their identification, and their authorization to work in the United States. And it runs it through basically a federal database that's administered by the Department of Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration, and basically spits back information about whether that person is authorized to work or not. And so they've made that mandatory in Florida as of July 1st. So already mandatory. We're 14 days into that as of the taping of this podcast, and we're still waiting to see how this is going to play out exactly because it's so new. But a lot of employers are really worried about this. The thing is that there's already the obligation to verify an employee's identity and work authorization. It's called an I-9 form. The I-9 form is federally mandated of all employers with employees on payroll. So those of you that are listening that are business owners, if you're not doing I-9s already, please call me because we need to have a chat. Very important. But the difference is that I-9s are not submitted to the government unless you get audited, right? So you have the obligation as an employer to do the I-9 the proper way, and then to maintain those records in the case that you get audited. And in the case you get audited, you have to produce those records pretty quickly, within a couple of days, to the government. But if you don't get audited, you never produce those records. E-Verify is real-time submission to the government. So it's like real-time I-9 audits on a constant basis. So it's a completely different ball of wax there. And it does not, it's in addition to your I-9 obligations, it doesn't replace the I-9 obligations. So you still have both. So now the employers with 25 or more will have both obligations. Yeah.
What are the potential penalties for an employer not following the E-Verify requirements now that is the new law?
It's going to be pretty hardcore. $1,000 a day for the most egregious non-compliance, but that is going to start kicking in next July. So they're giving employers a little bit of time to, get their ducks in a row. But, we're trying to figure out in my office because the law is not written very well. Sorry if anyone is listening that helped write this law, but I don't really think it's written very clearly. So, we're still trying to figure out like exactly how this is going to play out. But it seems like, they're going to look back and see like how badly did you non-comply in that first year, and then they're going to decide what kind of penalties. But it could be up to $1,000 a day of non-compliance, so that's pretty hefty. And then you could risk losing your business licenses as well. The Department of Economic Opportunity in the state is going to be basically reviewing all of this information, and if you're an egregious offender, you're going to be subject to losing licensure as well as the fines.
And
So it's heavy duty stuff.
So
It could close your business. It could close your business. An I-9 audit with penalties assessed can close your business. It can be hundreds of thousands of dollars even for a small company, because they look back at everyone that's in the retention period, even if they don't work for you anymore, and they assess the penalties per form. So, and they're pretty high. And now you're going to add on the E-Verify penalties. I mean, if you're not complying on this stuff, you could lose your business for sure if you get into trouble. So I try to express to people how serious this stuff is, because I feel like in South Florida we have a little bit of a culture of like, I'm not going to get caught. Like I'm not going to worry about that because I'm not going to get in trouble. And then, when the other shoe drops, it's like, oh, yeah, it's bad.
Don't take the chances.
Yeah.
No, that's very serious.
It's serious stuff for sure.
So if a business owner is listening today and they have, a business of 25 or more employees, it's a fairly sizable business. So they have like an HR manager, HR director handling this. The business owners should make sure that the HR director or manager is up to par with this law and is make sure that it's complying.
Exactly. So I speak every year at the HR Florida conference, and I'm speaking to those types of people, right? So the HR directors, HR managers, people who are responsible for doing this stuff for a company. But you look at companies that don't have HR managers, right? Like maybe there's just an office manager, and one of the functions that they do is some of the HR and onboarding functions, but they also have other responsibilities. A lot of times, those people that aren't dedicated to only this function are not up to speed. Maybe they're doing it, but they're doing it completely incorrectly, so they're still subjecting themselves to lots of penalties and fines. With the E-Verify stuff, I think it's really important that people start to get a handle on like what that's going to mean for them. They might need a dedicated employee just for that. I mean, depending on, how much hiring they do, and it could be a significantly time-consuming thing. So it's definitely something that companies need to focus on now, while the requirement is still new, right? This is not something you want to start thinking about a year from now when they're starting to assess penalties.
So they start auditing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to switch gears for a second. I want to talk before this is the last segment, something that I know is very dear to your heart, near and dear to your heart, is the Alopecia Foundation. What is the Alopecia Foundation, and what is your role in the organization?
So it's actually called the National Alopecia Areata Foundation, or NAF. This is the patient foundation for the autoimmune disease alopecia areata, which I have, and I've had it for over half my life now. So I was complaining to them about this headset because it's crushing my wig, because I wear a wig. I have no hair on my head. I don't have any eyebrows, eyelashes, body hair, nose hair, completely smooth. Which is nice from the neck down, but not so much from the neck up. And this is an autoimmune disease that just basically your immune system attacks your hair and causes it to fall out. And I just got it in the middle of my life at age 21. I was very hairy up till then. I'm Italian, so I always had like very thick hair, lots of hair everywhere, and not so much anymore. And so, but it was always in my body because it's a genetic, it's autoimmune genetic. It was in there. It just popped when I was 21, and it's quite traumatic. It really, when people say it's just hair, it makes me angry because I know they have good intentions when they say that, but it's really like losing a body part, and it really affects your identity and the way that you see yourself, the way that the world sees you. And it can cause a lot of people to have, some crisis in their life, emotionally, lots of psychosocial impacts to this disease. So the Alopecia Foundation, or the National Alopecia Areata Foundation, I've been involved with them for several years now. I'm lucky enough to be on their board of directors. I also served as their secretary of their board for several years. And of course, because I'm a lawyer, I have to be a strong advocate. So I'm actually the chair of their advocacy committee and one of the founding legislative liaisons for the foundation. So we do a lot of work with our Congress, trying to get our big push for several years has been to get cranial prosthetics, which is a fancy word for wigs, covered as medically necessary so that the CMS or Medicaid will cover them, and then hopefully private insurance will follow suit. Because right now, even when they're medically necessary and prescribed by a doctor, they're not covered because it's seen as cosmetic. So that's been our fight for a while with the congressional work that we've been doing. And now this year, big year for our foundation and for our patient community, because we have, at long last, the first 2 FDA-approved treatments for alopecia areata were approved this year, recently actually, in the past couple of months. And so now our new fight is going to be access to those treatments. They're extremely expensive. So access for our patients to those treatments is going to be, I think, our new fight.
How many people in the country are affected by this? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. I should know that, actually, so sorry. NAF people, if you're listening. I think it's...
We'll edit this out.
Yeah, I don't know the actual incidence rate off the top of my head, but it's actually a high number, but people will have it to different severity. So some people just get like a little patch or several patches, but they remain kind of small. You can hide them. That's actually how mine started. And then other people progress to like the most severe form like I have now. So you don't actually know a lot of the people that have it because they might be hiding it like I did for the first couple of years.
Is there any cost? What causes alopecia?
So we know it's genetic and it's autoimmune, but we don't know what actually causes it. But it can affect everyone. So there are little kids that have alopecia that lose their hair within a couple of weeks, and they're like little kids, toddlers, infants, teenagers, adults. You can get it. I know people who've gotten it at in their 60s. They never had it before. I got it in my 20s. So, and it affects all races and ages and both genders. So it really doesn't discriminate. It goes after all of us equally. So it can be tough, but the foundation's doing a lot of really good work. So we're excited about the new treatments and everything that's happening for our patient community. And beyond that, the foundation really just offers support to people with the disease and to people, their family members, because the families struggle a lot, especially parents of kids with alopecia really struggle with this, but also other loved ones. This can be really hard to deal with, and it's a very visible disease, so it's hard to just pretend like it's not there.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned treatment. What type of treatment has been approved?
So the 2 drugs that have been approved are what's called JAK inhibitors. They, so I'm going to tell you in a very unscientific way, but there's a message that's going from our immune system to our hair follicle that's telling it that it's evil and killing it, and the drug just comes and interrupts that message from like going through and allows the hair to grow. And that is a very, very, very rudimentary way of explaining it. Unfortunately for me, I don't think I'm a great candidate for the drugs because I've had total hair loss for over 10 years now. So according to the studies and the doctors, I'm not a great candidate for that reason. But there are a lot of people that it's going to help. So we're excited about that.
For anyone listening today is interested in learning more about the foundation, where can they get information?
So it's www.naaf.org. Or you can always reach out to me. I fancy myself an ambassador for the foundation, so I'd be more than happy to, especially here in Florida. I'm a support group leader as well here in South Florida, so I would love to connect with you one-on-one if you're interested in learning more, but the website is also a really great place for information.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking, by the way. I appreciate that.
No, my pleasure. I know that's very important to you.
Yes, it is.
And it's a very important cause, and it's a very important disease affecting a lot of people. So
it affects a lot of people, and it's a lot worse than people think, right? Like, people are like, oh, it's just hair. They kind of blow it off. But until it happens to you, you really don't understand the severity of what that means for a person. To wake up and look in the mirror and not recognize yourself is difficult.
So how do people, just to kind of recap some of the services that you offer investor visas, business immigration services, employer-based visas as well. What about individuals that are interested?
We work with a lot of individuals. We do, in our firm, we kind of sell the business immigration because it's like the sexy stuff, but we do a lot of family-based immigration, so U.S. citizens and permanent residents sponsoring family members for residents. We do a lot of that. We can help people become citizens and naturalize. We've been helping lately in the past couple years a lot of people with temporary protected status. They designated Venezuela as a country that is eligible for temporary protected status. So we finally started offering those services because we have a huge Venezuelan community that we service. So we help people from all over the world with basically any type of immigration need, especially if it's applying for a benefit, right? So if they're trying to get a benefit granted to them, a work permit, a travel permit, a visa, a green card, citizenship, where it's an affirmative application, that's really our sweet spot. Unfortunately, at our firm, we don't help people that are in a defensive position so much, like that are being removed from the United States and going before a judge. But we do basically everything else immigration related. And then in terms of defensive work, we do help, obviously, employers that are being audited on their I-9s. We can help them with that and hopefully help them in advance of getting audited by going into their companies and doing an internal audit, telling them what they're doing wrong, fixing the problems, training their staff, helping them with best policies and procedures going forward. And now with the new E-Verify mandatory in Florida, I think we're going to have a lot more of that business, hopefully, because we really want to help people proactively so that they don't get into trouble, and then we have to help them basically mitigate fines instead of helping them avoid the fines altogether by doing things right the first time around.
Before I wrap up, so if an employer is not sure whether he or she is really complying, you can provide like a compliance audit just to make sure that verify their I-9s, look at their employment records, look what they're doing, and then, if necessary, train that person, whether it's HR manager or the general manager of the business, to make sure that going forward they comply with that requirement. That's
right, and that's going to put a company in the best position, because if they do get audited, they're going to have all their ducks in a row beforehand. And maybe they won't even get assessed any penalties at all if you do all that internal auditing and compliance before you ever get audited. That's the idea, right? We always try to do prevention beforehand. That's always a better idea.
That could be the 9th business mistake that business owners
make. It could be. You might need to write a new book.
It'll be like version number 2 of the book.
Yeah, yes. That's right.
Yeah. So how do people find you, Deirdre?
So I have a website, obviously, neroimmigration.com is our website. So it's Nero, Nero, immigration.com. Also, you can email us at info@neroimmigration.com, or you can call my office. My phone number is 305-351-1079. Also, social media at Nero Immigration.
Of course, of course. Jared, thank you for joining us. I'm very excited, and this is extremely important information that you share with us today.
I'm so glad that you invited me. This was fun.
This is exciting. You're welcome to come anytime, and then
I'd love to come back. This was awesome.
great. Before I wrap up, just to want to give our listeners just how to reach me. It's rich@richsierra.com. If you're interested in learning about the legal services that we provide in our office, it's floridasmallbusinesslegalcenter.com. We're on Facebook at FSB Legal. You can call us at 866-842-5202. Remember that Business SOS, 8 common legal mistakes that business owners make and how to avoid them. It's available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstores. Also, if you like the podcast, give us a review. With a 5-star review. This is also shared with other business owners. And also in our show notes, we're going to have the information about today's episode, but also we're going to have the link to Deirdre's website as well, so you'll be able to reach her through the show notes as well.
Fantastic.
Okay, until next time, this is Rich Sierra. Remember that my goal is to help you succeed.